Before we begin, however, I do want to talk briefly about system requirements because Color is a very intensive program and has pretty specific requirements. First of all, in terms of the specific computer you're using, processor-wise, you can check the Apple website to verify the exact specifications, but you need a very modern computer. They recommend the Intel Core 2 Duo chip of, I think, at least 2 gigahertz. And if you're working on a G5, if you have an old Mac, whatever they call it, the old tower, G5 tower, I think you need at least 2.5 gigahertz dual processor minimum requirements. More importantly, though, is the screen resolution. Color really depends on having a lot of screen real estate to work with. In fact, if you try to launch it on a screen with a smaller resolution than 1620 by 1050, you're going to get a warning telling you that the program is not going to operate properly. It will let you continue, but it's not advised. In fact, for this training, we're working at 1600 by 1200, which is a little bit smaller than the software would prefer, and some of these text elements become really so tiny that they're almost unusable. In fact, the proper setup for a color system is to have 2 monitors, both running over 1600 resolution, so that you can have your primary window on one display and your scopes and video display on a second monitor. Talk more about dual display monitors in a little while. But a professional system would actually even have a third monitor, a broadcast monitor, showing the output of your video in the native format, be it HD or SD, depending on the sort of footage you're typically working with. And that monitor must be calibratable. It must be a monitor that you can calibrate to get the settings exactly right so that you can be sure that the colors are correct. On any computer monitor, even the most accurately calibrated computer monitor, you're still not seeing the video in the way that your audience would see it if they were going to be watching it on an HD monitor or an SD monitor. So the changes you're making are at best are relative. You can say that this image looks darker than the other, or that this image has, a slightly more red cast than the other, but you're not seeing the actual results of what your audience is looking at. And so it really is preferable to be working with a really complicated system there. 3 monitors, 2 computer monitors for your interface, and then a third monitor for your video output display. Certainly, if you can't afford a system like that, or if you don't have access to one, you can work on a smaller monitor. Color does have a single display mode, which is what you're seeing here, where the scopes are condensed into 1/3 of the screen and the composer window here is condensed into the other 2/3 of the screen. And you can do things in this sort of environment, but it's certainly not ideal. Finally, a very important aspect to working in color is you need a 3-button mouse. There are many controls in this program that require that 3-button mouse. And so if you don't have a 3-button mouse, there's going to be things you simply can't do. Things like scrolling around or zooming in and out on the timeline require using the second and third buttons on your mouse. All the numerical controls here, the only way to manipulate these is with a scroll wheel or by middle clicking. And again, we'll come back to that and talk about that in more detail later. But all of those controls require that 3-button mouse. And so if you have the standard 3-button Mighty Mouse that comes with most Mac systems, you can use that, or a third-party mouse. I'm going to just bring up the keyboard and mouse settings right here. It's very important that you set the right click to the secondary button, which will be right click, and then the scroll button, the third button, to button 3. You have to configure your mouse this way or things won't work properly in Color.